Hello, welcome back to the Evergreen Rx. I'm your host, Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party. And I am very excited for today's episode, you guys. I decided to eschew answering a listener question in favor of having Remy Ramirez on the podcast today to talk to us all about astrology and specifically the Chiron wound, which we will get back to in a second. But Remy, to let you guys know, she's an astrologer, a healer, a tarot reader, a mental health advocate, and she's the host of the Patrauma Party podcast, which you should definitely go check out, and I will have linked below. Remy and I got to do a wonderful episode all about disorganized attachment. So you guys know I've been doing my little mini series on attachment styles. And so the episode is finally here where you can go round out your education on attachment and listen and learn about disorganized. So yeah, today, like I said, we're going to be talking about understanding your Chiron placement. And if you have no clue what I'm talking about, Remy is going to catch us up to speed before we really get into the nitty gritty of how your Chiron placement affects your healing process, affects your relationships, and what you can do with that information. Because I think that's a big thing when it comes to astrology is, okay, now I know, my Chiron's in Sagittarius in whatever house, but now what do I do about that? Or am I just kind of saddled with this? So we'll definitely get into that and how it can really transform how you show up for yourself and your healing journey. And I also really love Chiron and was really excited Remy was happy to talk about it today because it has helped me personally with kind of knowing why I struggle with some of the things I struggle with and why it just seems to be so persistent. I've talked a lot on this podcast about how much therapy I've done. I've done a lot of my own work, and there's certain patterns or ways of thinking, ways of being with myself that it just seems like I can't shake. And understanding the Chiron wound has really helped with just even having compassion for myself on why maybe some of these things are a little bit more ingrained or harder to move past. And so I hope this is really helpful for you guys. I know that it will be. And the intention is that you can finish off this episode and go look at your Chiron and maybe do a little bit of research and understand more for yourself how to apply what you learn, and how to give yourself some compassion too for whatever in your life you're kind of here to learn and here to grow through. So yeah, I'm excited to have you, Remy. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I love this conversation.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. And I would love for you to tell everyone about Chiron and how you view it. I know that in some people refer to it as the wounded healer. So maybe give us an idea of what that means and how you would personally describe a Chiron wound, or if you would even use different language for it.
Yeah, so let me just start by saying I am a whole sign astrologer. Some astrologers read Placidus, right? There are different ways to read. I'm a whole sign astrologer. I very much look at Chiron. I look It's kind of one of the first things I look at, honestly, when I'm looking at someone's chart. To really understand Chiron, I think it's helpful to understand the mythology, to know the mythology of Chiron, because Chiron is a mythological creature. He was a centaur, and he was seen as an abomination by his parents. And so he was abandoned, right? They thought he was kind of a monster and they wanted nothing to do with him. He could have lived out their truth of him being an abomination, of him being worthless. But instead, he healed his abandonment wound, and then he went on to heal others who also suffered from an abandonment wound. So that is really the energy that we are thinking about when we're thinking about Chiron. In astrology, Chiron is actually an asteroid, right? And so this is the asteroid that takes on the uh, meaning, the the embodiment of our deepest wound, our childhood deepest wound. I mean, I have never seen a Chiron wound that didn't originate in childhood. These are the wounds that we get imprinted with
Mm.
very early on. And to your point, that can be why they can be very hard to shake. Um, but the the work that we have to do with the Chiron wound is to bring compassion to it, to bring curiosity to it, and
Mm.
to bring healing to it so that we can get compassionate and curious about other people's wounds.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really interesting. I like that you brought it to the mythology, because I know that's a big thing with astrology, the stories that shaped, how we view the different signs and things like that. And I guess that helped me understand a bit more kind of like the dual nature of Chiron, which is it like the journey of Chiron, which is that this very formative wound happened, this very formative story he was given to him. And then it's about not only what he did healing himself, but taking that out to others and helping others heal and being a teacher or being a healer in that way. And I don't think I understood that there's those two pieces to it.
Yeah, so this is part of what's so profound about Chiron is how we work with Chiron is our choice. We have free will. And so when we understand more about the Chiron wound, that's when we can, we can take steps to healing it and then we can bring that to other people. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like you become a guru, you become a therapist. It can just mean that like a friend comes to you and is like, I feel really abandoned in the case of Chiron, right? That was his wound. And then you're able to extend love and compassion to them and come from a place of I've been there. I understand. I mean, really it's the there's what's more healing than like just empathy, right? Being witnessed and being understood. So that's part of it. But yeah, we can also really start to extend when we have done the healing ourselves and really start to, we can become healers. We can become therapists if that's the choice. Or a 180 from that, we can just not even address our Chiron wound and act out of the wounded pattern till the day we die. It's up to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that is such an important piece to this too. Like what you're saying, it's kind of like we're given this opportunity, and I think a lot of people understand this in their own healing journey is that, I mean, you can face stuff or you cannot. That really is your choice. I think now with like psychology, like pop psychology and therapy becoming so much more mainstream and like socially acceptable, people kind of forget that there is a choice there. Like you don't like if you're not ready to go to therapy, please don't go yet. Like wait until you're ready. Wait until you actually want to dig into some of this stuff. I mean, if you need support, you need support. That's okay. But like, I think that there is a level of those of us that do choose to do this work to face those wounds, those really hard ingrained things, um understand that we want to do that because the alternate option is just having to live kind of with it or almost in spite of it, and like having to like do this dance with our wounds for the rest of our lives, and that just is very limiting and is going
Yeah.
to use a lot of our energy and use a lot of our resources. And so as much as it takes to do this work, we not only get to free up that energy and free up parts of ourselves, but also I think what you're saying is connecting more to our purpose as well, like connecting more to what we're here to help people understand or accept about themselves. Because you're right, like you don't have to become a teacher, a therapist, or a healer, whatever, but to even just have an experience in your life that you can say to someone, oh, I know what that's like, or this helped me, or I'm here for you because I've really been there. I mean, that is so powerful. And I think everybody is kind of is destined to do that in their own way and in their own little corner through what they experience and go through in their own life.
Right. Yeah. So Chiron is about, do I choose to acknowledge this? Do I choose to heal this? And do I choose to take that healing to others? And so that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about Chiron.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, how do you understand the placement of like your specific Chiron or my Chiron? Like the sign, the house placement, what does that tell us about how Chiron will show up in our life?
Yeah. So the sign and the house are a massive part of it. The other part of it, the other question to ask is, are there any aspects around it? Is it connected to any patterns? So I'll start with the houses. This is just to give people a bit of a debrief if they are unfamiliar with astrology. Every chart has 12 houses. So every person has 12 houses in their chart. Every house oversees a different area of life. So, for example, the second house oversees wealth, income, also how you value yourself, right? Value. So, money value, but also self value. The seventh house oversees one on one partnerships. So, most people think of it as the marriage house, but also best friends, business partners, partnerships, one on one partnerships fall into the seventh house. The 11th house is about community, friends, groups, audiences, right? Stuff like that. So every house oversees a different area of your life. So already you can see that where Chiron lands in your chart is going to impact a different area of your life. So that's number one. Number two is the sign. So once we know what house we're in, then we're going to want to look at what sign oversees that house. So this is where, if you're not familiar with astrology, it might get a little confusing, but just as a very like astrology 101, and again, I read whole sign, so this is a different way of reading than other people might read. But for whole sign, the way that I read, there is one sign for every house, and that the signs that are in each house are determined by the rising sign. So, for example, I have a Gemini rising. You might have I don't know, Taurus rising, a Libra rising, right? Whatever your rising sign is designates the first house. So I have Gemini rising, I have Gemini in the first house, and then everything sort of lays out from there.
Mhm.
So just because we both, like, let's say we both had Chiron in the seventh house, that doesn't mean we have it in the same sign.
Mhm.
So, once we know the house, then we look at the sign, and that gives us, um, really a lot of the in-depth information about what this pain is, what this struggle is. So I'll give you an example. I'll use my own chart as an example. I have Chiron in the 12th house, which is the house of mental health. So we have a wound that impacts mental health. That sucks.
Mm.
But also, the 12th house is the house of the subconscious. So it's sort of extra hard to get clear about the wound when it's in the house of the subconscious.
Mm.
This is where secrets lie, right? So pulling the wounds out into consciousness may take longer for someone with this placement. So that's what we know, first of all, because we're in the 12th house. I have Taurus in the 12th house, and Taurus is all about feeling safe.
Rough.
Taurus is all
You got a
about,
rough combo.
yeah, we were not set up very well. Well, we were set up with a tremendous challenge, right? And so here's what's really interesting about sort of my story with that is I did not realize that my parents weren't safe for a very long time, into my 40s. It took me a very long time to understand that. And, I talk very openly about, I have no contact with both of my parents. And I talk about that very openly on my podcast. And it's not because I think they're bad people. It's because I have come to understand that they aren't safe. But it took me a very long, long, long time to do that. And so that's the first thing that we look at, the house, then the sign. Okay, now we know more. Yep. Um, Taurus really values being able to relax and feeling safe, right? Really, you can only relax when you feel safe. So these are the areas where I have wounding. Then you want to look to the aspects and the patterns. So for me, I have an opposition to Chiron, which makes a lot of sense. This opposition makes all the sense in the world. I have Chiron opposite Venus. So Venus rules relationships. So a big part of my wounding is that this inability to feel safe and this inability to know that I don't even feel safe,
Mm.
this wound here is really creating a lot of issues with relationships. And what does that look like? Well, of course, Venus rules the feminine. And when the feminine is disrupted, it can look one of two ways. It can look like having too many boundaries and being shut off and not being open to that flow of love and affection and harmony that Venus likes. It can also go the other way and look like people pleasing, not having any boundaries at all. And my story is very much that. It's been a flip flop, right? Pre therapy, pre healing, a flip flop of being completely shut off slash uh, being sort of having rose colored glasses on and being codependent and like giving and giving and giving to people who really weren't safe.
Mm.
So that gives you an idea of how we figure out when we're looking at a chart what the wound is that Chiron is working with.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, how, out of all of the things on an astrology chart, which there are many, and when you add in the aspects and everything, many more things to unpack, like this Chiron placement, like you said, it's like the first thing that you go to, one of the first things you go to. Do you think that this is something that impacts us? I don't know. I don't want to say more because I know it all has its place, but like it feels really important when you're talking about, how this even shows up in your life. And I'm wondering, like, is that kind of across the board? Is that true for people that they find that when you really can understand this Chiron placement and all of its aspects and everything, that it really helps put a lot into um perspective about how their life has taken shape, what the things are that they're struggling with? Or I don't know, are there other placements that also kind of hold that information or reflect it?
There is no other placement that holds this specific information. And to your question about like, are there any other placements that are maybe as important, right? I think it really depends on how the chart holder works with this information.
Mm.
Because a lot of people come to astrology, I would say 95% of people come to astrology wanting to know, when will I get married? How much money will I make?
Mm.
Right? And
Mhm.
that's me too, right? Like we do want to look to astrology for like, when is the best time to launch a business? When is the best time to meet someone? And all of that. Astrology is helpful in all of these different ways. The deeper you are willing to go, and this isn't the sexy, glitzy, fun shit. This is the mud, right? Chiron is the mud. And this is why it's only been recently that people even talked about Chiron in astrology, right? Because it's not really what people are excited to hear about.
Mhm.
But if you are willing, like, yeah, you might meet someone, and I see that in your chart, or I see that, with the transits. I might be like, wow, you might really meet someone during this time. True. But if you haven't healed your Chiron wound,
Mm.
who cares? Like, literally, who fucking cares? Because you're gonna fuck it up.
Yeah.
you know, right? Like you are
Yeah.
going to go back into those old patterns of being too guarded and pushing people away, or you're going to go back into those old patterns of codependence, and you're going to attract people who like you because you're right, or like having no
Yeah.
boundaries. People who there are people out there who like people who don't have boundaries because then they can kind of take advantage of that. You'll attract one of those. So, like, yes, we love the fun, glitzy glamour of astrology, but getting into the mud is really how we allow those kind of the things that we get more readily excited about to actually flourish.
Oh my God, I love that because I think sometimes people come into therapy with a similar kind of idea, or like they have these goals. Like, I just need to figure out what my career move is. I'm not satisfied with my career. I just need to figure out what I need to do. And then I'm sitting there being like, oh my God, like your attachment style, the conflict in your relationship, the chronic like avoidance and fantasizing behaviors that you go to, what that it's all tied together. And I'm like, girl, I am not going to be able to help you figure out your career. You're not going to know what the hell you want to do
Right.
because there's all this other stuff. Or, like you said, like, sure, like go out, date, or you'll meet someone or whatever. But it's not, what does it matter? Like,
Totally.
literally, what does it matter? Because there's all of this other stuff. And it's like, it's not, to add like a pile on, or I think that people can heal their stuff kind of in process while they're building a relationship, or they make a move before maybe they're totally ready. And sometimes that really just does end up working out or teaches us what we need to know for sure. But it is funny and it's very relatable that you say, like that this is a more of a keystone piece. It's like without this kind of keystone, shit's gonna it's not gonna be structurally sound. Like,
That's exactly it. It doesn't have the foundation needed to actually grow. It's like in tarot, because I also read tarot. In tarot, we have the tower card, and people always fear the tower, right? If you look at the picture in sort of the original deck, it's like it's a tower, right? It looks like a castle tower that's on fire and people are jumping out of it, right? No one wants to get the tower card. But the reason we get tower energy in our lives is because we have tried to build something without the foundation.
yeah.
And what happens when we do that? It falls it lights on fire and everyone jumps out and it crumbles to the ground. Right? Like that's what that energy is. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we have to go into that mud. We have to go into those uncomfortable places if we actually want a strong foundation, a structurally
Mm,
strong foundation where these other places in our lives can actually can really flourish and grow.
mhm. Wow, yeah, that makes so much sense. I think it really helps also highlight how essential this is. And I'm really interested in how your Chiron wound can show up in your healing journey. Like, I'm curious about certain placements. Like, do some placements make it harder relationally or to feel safe? Like in your example, in more prone to feel like a victim or have a harder time asking for help or in self-criticism. How can we kind of understand how our Chiron might actually block or make it difficult for us to do the healing that we need to do with it?
Mm. Yeah, that is such an interesting question. Well, for example, mine. Not to make this all about me, but Chiron in the 12th house is a particularly difficult placement because you don't even know about it. And so, like, for me, what that looked like was fantasy bonding with my parents, really telling myself a story that my parents really loved me and they not, and whatever, like, I'm not really trying to comment on how my parents feel about me, but what I'm trying to talk about is um being embroiled in patterns of delusion to try to maintain feeling safe with people who aren't safe, right?
Mm,
And so when lying to yourself as a matter of survival is so deeply imprinted into your programming, it makes it very hard to understand what doesn't what safety actually is.
mhm, mhm.
So that's one example. But yes, like Sure, there are. Like, for example, Chiron in Virgo is really tough because Virgo is all about perfectionism and being, well, the shadow of Virgo. There are a lot of lovely things about Virgo, but the shadow of Virgo is all about being very critical. So if you have Chiron there, there's going to be a lot of perfectionism and a lot of self criticism.
Mm,
And so if your whole goal is to look perfect, then admitting that you have a massive wound around perfectionism is, yeah, that makes it really difficult to say, like, actually, this is a problem, right?
yeah.
So yes, there are different places where I think Chiron and Pisces is another one, because Pisces is very escapist in its shadow. Pisces wants to just check out and go to like a dream realm.
Mm,
And in order to heal the wound, you have to get very present and clear,
mm,
and you have to be willing to stay with it. And if you have a wound that's asking you to constantly escape and numb, which can look like addiction, which can look like denial, it can also look like toxic healing practices. Like, um, I just do ayahuasca, you know, 3 times a month, and or I'm just like constantly shrooming to try to heal, when like what you actually need to do is feel the feelings, not try to escape the feelings, right?
wow.
So yeah, there are definitely placements that can make it harder to work with the wound, and and it's not impossible ever. It's
Yeah.
never ever impossible. So even in a case like mine, where it took me a very long time to figure out what safety even was, um, I still, because I had been committed to therapy for years, at the point when I finally, I mean, yes, at the point where I finally got clear, but I want to back up and say it was because of all those years of therapy that I was finally able to get to that point where there was clarity. You can still do it, but it can elude you if you're not committed. Yeah.
Mm. So interesting. It's like the antidote is in the opposite. So it's like whatever your wound is that you're trying to heal, like it's really clear. I feel like with Virgo, where it's like, okay, so if you have a perfectionist, like an issue with perfectionism, and that's what you say would want to go work on or something, but then admitting that you're not perfect,
Right.
which is what you need to do, is so hard. Or like for you, the safety wound, but expressing that, sitting with that requires you to feel safe enough to do it. Like it is, they kind of wrap around each other. And so
Yes.
I'm think it's painting the picture. Like I know in the episode we did, you said my Chiron is in Sagittarius, and it's like, okay, so that might be an example where if I know what Chiron and Sagittarius means, if I kind of think about the opposite or that shadow side, the kind of fall of it, that then that can tell me basically what I need to do or what I could do moving forward to try to heal it.
Right. And so, yeah, for you, let's take you for example. Chiron in Sagittarius is often a wound around beliefs, belief systems. So I could look at that and say, without knowing anything else about your chart, which you would definitely want to know more than just the sign, but if I just knew this person has Chiron and Sagittarius, I would say, like, okay, this might be someone who was wounded in the church, for example, who had a crisis of faith. This might be someone who their whole belief system felt um, like they had to come to terms at some point with their belief system wasn't matching their life, or it wasn't healthy for their life. And these belief systems can look like all kinds of things. I'm not enough. That's a belief system. No one will ever love me, right? Like those are some of the belief systems. Also, Sagittarius is expansive, right? That's this Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter wants to take up as much space as possible. So there could also be a wound around I don't want to be seen. I want to
Mm.
hide. I don't I don't feel good enough to be in the spotlight, right? Like a shyness wound, it could even look like.
Mm.
So, so if if let's say you had this wound around beliefs, um, the beliefs are probably preventing you from wanting to heal or feeling like healing is possible. If you
Right.
feel like I'm never going to be good enough and life is never going to get better for me, then why would you even try, right? So yes, to your question, yes, Chiron can stand in the way of it, and we can also, if we so choose, we can move past that.
Mm. Wow, it's so fascinating. And I feel like you've already kind of touched on, how this can show up in our romantic life and our relationships. Like, it's interesting because it sounds like there's a bit of, you're born and Chiron is in a certain position, like how all the other, how planets and stuff are in your chart as well. But then that there's maybe a connection to an early childhood experience or something that actually happens in our life that then mirrors that placement that was there the day we were born. Is that Am I getting that right?
Okay, yeah, so you're touching on a big question around that a lot of people have around astrology. My belief is that a, many of the things that we experience in our life were predetermined before we got here.
Mhm.
We came in with the agreement that we would work through specific things in this lifetime. And so, for example, you talked about a wound around friendships. And was that on this podcast or the other
The
podcast we
other
did?
one, but
Okay. Okay, in our
I talk
other
about it
podcast.
on here a lot.
Okay. Okay, so obviously you didn't come out of the womb with wounds around friendships, right? That happened later in life. But that was part of part of your destiny. It was literally part of your destiny to experience that. That was something that you signed up for to experience in this lifetime. And maybe like if let's say for example your Chiron wound is around shyness, let's say. Those friendship wounds might have impacted feeling
Mm.
shy, right?
It's so funny that you say that because talking about, my placement in Sagittarius and stuff and belief systems, the first thing that came to my head was like, oh, some of the friendships, specifically one friendship when I was younger that went poorly, that ended, really, really formed and kind of shaped or like shook up my belief system about
Mm.
myself, kind of about the world, like trying to make sense of that. And that it's really interesting that you bring that up because it feels like there's a million different ways that that glass kind of like could have shattered. And I guess because of my predisposition, it went to my beliefs about myself and about the world versus somebody else that it maybe would go into the direction of, well, I can't make mistakes in relationship. I must be a people pleaser and show up perfectly or whatever. And it's all flavors of the similar kind of stuff, but
Mhm.
yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah, so I think the question you were essentially asking was um why is it that this is like in the chart from the moment that you're born but you haven't experienced it yet? And that is because I know a lot of people shy away from using astrology as a predictive tool, but I actually, my belief is that it is predictive and that we can see, right? Like I didn't come out of the womb um, having trouble with boundaries, but that was something that was sort of, that was the chemistry of my chart. And that was something that most certainly I lived into, right? And you lived into the wound that you did. And so I think people get antsy because they're like, I want to feel like I have full control over your life. In a way you do, but you're just so zoomed in that you can't see it. If you zoom out and you see that we are all having a spiritual experience in these lifetimes, and that my belief is that we reincarnate. This was a choice that you made before you came here. You just don't remember that.
Mm. I like that. Yeah. So how do we take this information and transform it into action and into wisdom? And kind of in conjunction with that, I'm really curious to hear if you think that this is a, we heal this in our lifetime, or if it's kind of an ongoing process that we go through.
Yeah. So let me start with this. When you're looking at a chart, every celestial body, every sign has a symbol. And the symbol for Chiron is a key.
Hmm.
And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. The reason for that is because getting into these wounds, working with these wounds is literally the key to unlocking the highest version of your life. So, when you're asking, how do we use this to transform? Well, the first thing we do is we get cognizant, we become aware of these wounds, right? We look at our chart, we look at the sign, the house, the aspects and the patterns to understand what this wound really is.
Mm,
And from there, it's really about your commitment to it. Because every wound is going to look different, right? A lot of them do come down to similar things, self-worth, but also it could be beliefs about the world. It could be body image stuff like that's very much focused on the body. It could be men aren't safe, women aren't safe, right? Like there's all different ways. Relationships aren't safe. All different ways that these can look. So once we know about it, then really the healing can look um, very individual to what works for you, whether
mhm,
that's therapy, whether that's like hypnosis, whether that's starting a podcast about mental health, which is what I did.
yeah.
So so for to that point, I think that it's very individual. It's really getting in touch with what works for you, and part of understanding what's going to work for you will probably also depend on your chart, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
again, we don't heal when we don't feel safe or calm, right? Like we
mhm,
need to be able to like help ourselves relax and help ourselves feel safe. That's where we can like sort of open up and take up more space. And what makes you feel safe might be different from what makes me feel safe.
mhm.
So that's a big part of it. And then your other question was, is this something that we heal in this lifetime?
Yeah.
You know, I think it can be. I think it's such a great question. I think it can be. And I think often it's not.
Mm,
And when that happens, I don't know for sure because I don't know. I have my beliefs about what happens when we get to the other side, but I don't obviously like have a way of fact checking. um but what I suspect, because also one thing that you can see in the chart is the south node, which contains the energy of your karmic past,
mm,
which often looks like past lives. Um, what I suspect is that we bring that wound into the next lifetime if we don't work with it
yeah.
and create healing for it in this lifetime.
Well, that's thrilling for me. I like and I think probably a lot of people listening, I like the idea that we can heal it because it's, it's one of those things like in astrology that it's a snapshot. And so,
Right.
my moon is in Cancer. That's just a part of who I am and how I feel internally and how, I'm going to be like that. I'm not trying to heal myself out of being a moon in Cancer or whatever.
Right.
Um, so I think that's where this thought came from is like, oh, well, if that's our Chiron, then we're just kind of, that's one of our struggles in life. But I think that's missing the piece that we started with, which is the other part of Chiron's story is taking what he learned in his experience and teaching others and sharing with others. And when you know that, I think is a lot more hopeful and a lot more clear that this is something
Yeah.
we can actually transform and change throughout our own growth journey and throughout our life.
Yeah, and I don't think we're ever done healing in general, but I
Yeah.
do think that we can get to a place where we master certain areas, right? Or like get really good at it. Like I can get a lot better around people pleasing, right? Like that is something that is sort of healable in this life. I can get a lot better at letting my guard down and being vulnerable. Like things that before used to feel like if I had to be that vulnerable and say that to a person, I would fucking pass out, right? Like I would like there's no way I would be my body would even allow me to do it because it would
Yeah.
feel so unsafe. Now I can say to someone in the face of rejection, here's
Mhm.
how I feel about you.
Mhm.
And if you don't feel the same way about me, that's okay.
Mhm.
Right? Like that was not even a possibility, 10 years ago in my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think that we can really transform our relationship to these wounds in this lifetime. And
Mm.
again, it's free will. If we don't, we just have another opportunity the next time around.
Yes. It's good motivation to work on it
Yeah.
in this lifetime. But it's a nice consolation, or I guess comfort that we'll have time in the future too if we don't get to all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Remy, this has been so wonderful, and I would love to know, as we finish off this conversation, what are your three things for living well? What are your must have, must do?
Yeah. My number one thing is fun.
Hmm.
I cannot if I'm not having fun. I really need to have fun, and I also really need to have rest, and those are 2 things I
Mm,
take very, very seriously. I went freelance years ago, and it was because, like, I'm not a morning person. I like, you will not see me out of bed before 10 AM unless there's an alarm involved. So and I also take fun really seriously. Like I don't fuck around when it comes to fun. I need to be having a good time. My bank account's a little bummed about that, but the rest of me is very happy about that. And I would say the third thing is beauty.
mm.
I really need beauty, and that can look a lot of different ways. Like I love to. She loves an aesthetic. She loves to serve looks. I love to decorate.
Mhm.
But I also like I went to grad school for creative writing and poetry. Like
Mm.
I love art and beauty and expression, and I think those fun, rest, and
Beauty.
all the myriad forms of beauty, those are the things that I could never do without.
Oh, I that's such a wonderful answer. I feel like that encapsulates you as a person and my experience of you just in the small chunks of time we've gotten to spend together. And I think that's really inspiring too, coming back to, things that each of us values and holds really dear and, makes us feel alive or whatever. That's the intention of living well, I believe. It's like what makes you feel alive, what actually makes you, helps you enjoy this life and this time that we have. And I think that you have such a wonderful understanding of what that is for yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for seeing me.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you? I'll have you linked below, but tell them for the people that like uh audio answer.
Yeah. For all you audio folks out there.
Mhm.
So I have a podcast, The Patrama Party. It's like pajama party, but patrama. And you can find that anywhere. And you can also find me on socials. I'm at the Patrama Party on Insta and on TikTok. And if you want to do sessions with me, you can just go to my podcast and look in any of the show notes, the podcast notes, and you can find the link there to book a session with me. And you can also email me, patramaparty@gmail.com.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. ask follow-up questions, engage with both of us online. We would love to hear how all of this landed and what your Chiron placement is and how it shows up in your life. And I'll catch you guys next Wednesday.